Hi, Genderqueer Chad. It's Cole here. Happy New Year to you. And this week's topic, I actually chose this week's topic, and it states, think about yourself in a different time in your life when you thought about gender or the world in a different way. What are your thoughts on gender? What were your thoughts on gender? Misconceptions. What would your past self think of the current you? What would you think about your past self knowing what you do now about gender and the binary world we live in? Well, I thought about doing this topic several different ways, and I think what I'm going to do is break it down according to different time periods in my life, starting with my life as a child. I was actually a lot like Jack. I always wanted to play, the male role if we were playing house or something like that. Or I would always want to be the animal because the animal was more non-gendered and didn't have the same expectations and roles as other people in the game. I never really related to binary things when I was a child, such as Barbies or on either extreme, really. Although I was definitely more of a little boy at that time. I ran around, with my shirt off all the time as a kid because it felt natural to me. I didn't have any idea I wasn't supposed to be doing that. I often retreated into sort of my own head, my own imaginary world. I was an only child, so it was hard for me to relate to other kids. I don't know if that was a direct connection with being genderqueer. I think it had some to do with it. I think that I definitely dressed in boys' clothes when I was little, except when my mom forced me into dresses for church and stuff. But when I was, really young, I was, considered coined a tomboy for my family. But really, I was just genderqueer all along. But I was a bit of a loner, and I think some of it was because I was genderqueer. When you're younger, you listen to the voices of your parents and teachers and the media, and you have all this information flooding you, and your little mind can't really you can't wrap your head around that when you're, 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. So at the time, I think I was a little bit young to be thinking about gender in terms of a binary system. But I definitely have always had these gender issues, and I've always been genderqueer. I think if my child self met me now, I think that I would have been intrigued. I was kind of a people watcher as a child. I was always interested in older people who were different from me. I think it's because, I didn't really fit in with people my age. I don't think at this time in my life, between let's say 5 and 12, I would have been able to talk about, trans or genderqueer issues, just simply because I just don't think it was in my realm of thinking at the time. I just had no reference for that type of conversation. So I think that I would have been really confused and not been able to really have a conversation about that yet at that time. I was a late bloomer. I always have been. I guess the next big chunk of my life would have been adolescence, which we'll say was like between 12 and 17. And this is when I thought about gender in the most binary sense that I ever have in my life. I was very into religion at the time because of my upbringing and my, where I was raised. And that type of thinking taught me that gender was important. It was important to live your gender daily. And as well as thinking about gender in terms of long-term goals, I thought that to be a woman, an acceptable woman, I needed to change the way that I naturally, my natural traits, my natural mannerisms, and try to feminize those as much as possible to be able to be accepted and to feel a sense of belonging to my church family at the time. And of course, at the time, I've always been romantic. I've always wanted love in my life. And, now I know, even sometimes maybe an overabundance of love is what my downfall is, I think. But because of this trait that I have, I've always wanted to find, people to love, people in my life that love me in a romantic way. And I was told growing up in my adolescent years from the church that in order to be able to do that, I really needed to sort of emulate characteristics of femininity to attract a mate. And of course, I know that that's completely wrong now, but at the time, that's what I was given as information, and I believed it because I trusted the people that, people that were telling me these things. They were people that I felt had my best interest at heart, when really maybe they didn't. Maybe they, I don't think that they meant to hurt me in any way, but, it was traumatic at the time to go through that process of having to try to change myself for this ultimate goal. I really didn't know what the word trans meant. I definitely heard the word trans, but I had no reference for that. I don't really necessarily know. I may have seen a couple of documentaries on surgery, people who changed their gender completely medically, but that was really the only reference I had there. And then, of course, cross-dressers, which often get confused with trans people. I think if I would have met if I would have met my current self at this adolescence time in my life, I think that I would have thought that I was really opinionated, rude, and needed to be saved. I think that I would have comprehended a gender journey. I think that I would have been able to talk about that in some senses, but I really don't think that I would have had a context for that, for gender being fluid or anything. So it probably would have been difficult for me to interact with someone that was genderqueer or trans at the time. I just think I would have invited me to church, probably, in the end. So I guess, I don't know if I've mentioned my age. I try to avoid it, but I am 26, so I guess, I have one more sort of stage in my life after adolescence, which is early adult. We'll say 18 to 24. Well, we'll say 23 because that's when I came out as genderqueer, but my early adult years, I first went to college and came out as lesbian. I definitely at this time was thinking about gender in a non-binary sense, but more in a lesbian context, using words such as butch, femme, and things like that, which kind of reinforce the binary in some ways, but it is a different expression of gender than your male-female binary boxes. So that was good for me to think in terms like that. I never really identified with any of those terms, but at least I was around it and sort of had interaction with other gender options or presentations even. So this was about, I guess, 7 to 8 years ago that I came out as a lesbian at the time, and I think that that if I would have met me now when I was going through this coming out process, I would have been surprised at myself now, mainly because of sexual orientation issues that I have now, or not issues, but sexual orientation interests that I have now. I worked so hard coming out. It was a really harsh coming out, and as I've stated in other videos, I won't go into that. You can look back on some other videos and look at that. But now I identify as pan-romantic, which isn't as I guess pan-romantic isn't a common word to use for your sexual orientation, but it's the only thing I found that really fits how I feel, which is that I am romantically attracted and interested in any gender identity imaginable, but as far as sexual interaction goes, I have a hard time feeling comfortable with all with cis men, but that I'm definitely open to any romantic interaction with anyone. But so far, that's been my it's kind of my conclusion that I've come to after debating all these things and, you know, having all these issues with why am I genderqueer but can't get over someone's gender in a sexual or dating sense. So for me, I think that being panromantic would have been a really big surprise for me 8 years ago, because of how sure I was that I was a lesbian. But these things can change, and that's what's interesting about gender journeys and sexual orientation, is that it's not a set in stone thing. For some people, it absolutely is. For other people, it's more fluid. And I think keeping everything fluid helps you to not go crazy, because we change. I mean, look how much someone changes. Look how much I've changed from when I was 16 and, you know, completely obsessed with the idea of God and of gender binary and of the American sort of spirit and dream that I just feel a little disconnected with now. So I think that the old me would have liked the new me and been surprised, but I think we would have had a nice cup of coffee and a good conversation. And I think that at that time, about, 18, 19, I was starting to become open to things. All parts of my journey have been difficult, but all of them have helped me to become the person that I am today and comfortable with myself. I'm not a judgmental person in general, so I think that if I were to meet my past self now, or someone like I used to be, I would try to educate them and understand that everyone has to come to terms with gender in their own time frame. And it's just not up to me to decide for them what gender means. All I can do is educate, and all I can do is continue to live my life truthfully and hope that that other people will also find themselves fully. All right, see you next week.